I was about a year in Tanzania and then about 10 years, 11 years in Japan altogether. Yeah, very different. I always love to travel, and then once you come somewhere, you just have to adapt. And obviously, very different from Tanzania to Japan. And meantime, I studied in Italy. I studied in the UK as well. So all very different cultures, right?
Do you believe that in some way Infobip's story is inspiring them as well? Because it is, after all, it was a startup, and it was also a bootstrap startup. So the success that you have made, being also in a region that is not typically associated with unicorns yet.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, and also started in Vodnjan, which is like a small town on the coast.
On top of everything, yeah.
That now has approximately same amount of inhabitants as Infobip has employees. We are a very, international company. We have about 75 offices around the world. We're a global leader in what we do. I mean, every ecosystem has its own peculiarities. Every ecosystem is special in its own way. So Japan has this cultural issue, but then on the other hand, Japan is super rich as a country, and they have a lot of capital. They want to deploy. They want to. They're really good at perfectioning things. They want to make new processes, new products. Their country also very tangible products. So software, for example, is something not tangible. So for them, is kind of, they prefer like when you can build something and feel it, which I can fully understand. Yeah, I mean, every ecosystem, as I said before, has its peculiarities, and you have to leverage the strengths of every ecosystem. Whether it's an engineering talent, whether it's the good media, whether it's the enormous amount of capital that Japan maybe has. I worked on some projects in Cuba, which is not the obvious example for startup success, but they have great engineers.
Yes.
And they're in the same time zone as America. But then a lot of external factors come in. You had elections in America that overturned the relationship with Cuba, for example. But there was one point that the opening was like this huge kind of force was kind of opening towards, for example, and then they were trying to leverage on that. They completely like the infrastructure. There is no internet, there is no mobile internet, etc. But where there is a will, there is a way.
Hello, Recursive community. Today we're hosted by Croatia's first unicorn, Infobip, here at their hub in Zagreb. And our next guest, Nikola Pavesic, is Director of DevEx and Startups at Infobip. He started his career in the public sector for the UN in Tanzania, followed by an engagement with the same organization in Japan. Later on, he began working in tech at the UN and then switched to the private sector, launching, running, and exiting a startup. Nikola then joined Nikkei, the world's largest business media publisher and owner of the Financial Times, where he led partnerships at the Editorial Innovation Bureau. And now he is director of DevEx and Startups at Infobip, one of the few bootstrapped unicorns globally with more than 70 offices worldwide. Nikola launched their startup program, working now with over 600, or you mentioned actually there are more in between?
Yeah, we have over 1,000 applications.
1,000 applications this year, startups, and 100 investor partners around the world. Nikola, it is a pleasure to have you here. Actually, thank you for having us.
Great to have you here. Thanks for coming.
Now, you had an interesting career with a lot of switches, and your background is in law. Yeah?
Yeah.
How did law prepare you for that career path?
I think life is pretty unpredictable, so you don't know where you're going to end up. I wasn't much of a lawyer, to be honest. Like I did study law and all that, but I never really envisioned a career in law. And then, funnily enough, at the UN, we started developing in-house systems, project management software, and so on. And I thought, like, oh, this is super cool. I want to work in tech. So this was my maybe 10 years ago or so decision to work in tech, and then I ended up doing my own startups and working in tech companies, or just doing tech stuff at bigger companies. And now Infobip is a pretty big tech company, so it kind of makes sense. But the love came originally from figuring out you can do a lot from scratch, from nothing, and I was super excited about that part.
What was the initial aspiration? What did you want to become when you grow up? Do you remember?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. I liked the public sector. That's why I wanted to work in the UN. I always envisioned this like very interesting, exciting career. You get to travel a lot. You get to solve some major, problems. And then once you actually end up there, you learn there's a lot of maybe blockers like everywhere else, and it's pretty big organization and stuff. But it was very, very good. It was a very good learning curve for me, and that's how I ended up in tech. So that's good. Yeah.
One thing leads to the other.
Yeah.
I wonder also about this transition from Tanzania to Japan. These two cultures seem to me very, very different.
Yeah.
How did you manage to adapt? I mean, how much time do you spend in Tanzania and then later on in Japan?
I was about a year in Tanzania and then about 10 years, 11 years in Japan altogether. Yeah, very different. I always love to travel, and then once you come somewhere, you just have to adapt. And obviously, very different from Tanzania to Japan. And meantime, I studied in Italy. I studied in the UK as well. So all very different cultures, right? It's always tough when you come somewhere, but then you learn. You know, Japan is I always say it's my favorite place in the world, but it's very alien in a way, the way how things work. But you know, it's a beautiful place. It's a beautiful city, Tokyo, and it's you know, Japan is still like the third or fourth largest economy in the world. People tend to forget that recently, but it's super successful. A lot of big companies, a lot of talent. So it was great. But there was a period of adaptation that was necessary for sure. Yeah.
How did this experience working with the UN and also working in the private sector influence you later on as a founder? And where did you get the the entrepreneurship bug?
Yeah, I don't think I'm that good in planning, so things just happen to happen somehow. But I always say going from the public sector to the private sector is a big slap in the face, figuratively speaking, because it's hard, because you have to make your own money. You know, I mean, obviously you have to make money in the public sector as well, but you have to kind of you fight for budgets. It's very different. And then when you run, especially when you're an entrepreneur, when you run your own startup, you have to get out there. You have to make the money. You have to go door to door and sell the product. No one really knows about you. That was hard. Hard. You had to go to meetups and talk to people. I was very nervous. I would have to, have a couple of beers before, just to relax and like try and get some feedback, collect people to start using the platform, etc. It is hard, but it's exciting. It's much faster moving, faster paced. So it's kind of, I prefer the private sector now. Yeah.
Now you prefer the private sector. Do you miss the times as a founder? Like, what was your company about?
It was a project it was like a hiring platform for startups in Japan. At the time, Japan culturally really is not fit for startups in a way, because it was a new thing. They're a country of big companies, and career for life. So what we try to actually motivate people. It's basically a job board where startups can obviously post their jobs and apply and get the applicants, and then people can apply. And obviously engineering talent is something that always everyone looks for. So it was very basic, but at the time there wasn't even a word in Japanese for startups. So it was kind of a new thing. Now the English version of it's startup or startup, and then now it's kind of becoming like a common term in the language. At the time, there's like 8-9 years ago or so, it was it was really kind of frowned upon. In Japan, as a culture, failure is not really well accepted, as opposed to maybe Silicon Valley, where everyone failed, few startups, and they talk about it, and they were like, oh yeah, I started 3 startups, and before I succeeded with my 4th startup. In Japan, this is they're not really risk prone. They're more risk averse than I would say like Silicon Valley or some other places.
But I wouldn't expect that the culture itself was adopted that late.
Yeah, it is. It's still kind of. I mean, every ecosystem has its own peculiarities. Every ecosystem is special in its own way. So Japan has this cultural issue, but then on the other hand, Japan is super rich as a country, and they have a lot of capital. They want to deploy. They want to. They're really good at perfectioning things. They want to make new processes, new products. Their country also very tangible products. So software, for example, is something not tangible. So for them, is kind of, they prefer like when you can build something and feel it, which I can fully understand. Yeah.
Well, at the same time, when it comes to hardware stuff, I think Asia is definitely at the forefront and is doing much better job than Europe.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah, I mean hardware. Yeah, I mean all of Asia, of course, but Japan especially, they love hardware. Obviously, you can start from car companies to any other industry they're really good at. But software is more. And I have the same feeling, with startups as well. When you find a startup that does hardware, there's actually something that you can hold in your hand. They have supply chains, and it's much harder. I think hardware is much harder in a way, and software is just like a bunch of people on a computer, which is also super hard.
Yeah,
But it's kind of different feeling than a hardware company.
definitely.
Yeah.
Now, why did you decide to come back to Croatia, and how did you find out about Infobip?
Oh yeah. Well,
When did you join?
funnily enough, it's a bit of a long story, but I'll try to make it short. Ivan Burazin, who founded Shift, the conference, he actually met him in Tokyo. He was one of the startups that was pitching at our conference that organized by Nikkei in Tokyo at the time, Pioneers Asia, which was the Asian version of the Pioneers that was held in Vienna at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And he was one of the startups. So that's how we met. And then I heard about Shift, and then I started coming more home and contributing to Shift in a way, helping them a little bit with speakers, participating, speaking at a conference. And then when Shift got acquired by Infobip and became Infobip Shift now, then Ivan rang me up, and then he was like, "Oh, I'm running this developer experience department now, but I also need someone to start the whole startup department for Infobip." And I knew of Infobip from before, as I was already getting more and more in touch with the Croatian startup scene. And then here I am. It was like good timing was right, and we worked together really well. And then it's been 3 years now.
What is developer experience, by the way? I mean, is it are developers a different species of people, so they need like their whole extra category, or? I'm sorry, I'm just joking.
You're putting me on a spot here, because there's no right answer. But no, developers are very unique in a way in how there's a specific type of customer for us, a specific type of user. It's we work as Infobip with a lot of enterprise companies, a lot of big companies, and developers are actually the one implementing very often our solutions, our software, and so on. And so it's all about creating awareness and the tools for them to actually engage with your products. Mm-hmm. So that means APIs, the documentation, the SDKs, so anything related to make their job easier. So what basically we want to do is, if you're a developer, we want you to know about Infobip, what Infobip does. That's the first order of business, and the second order of business is maybe how can it be helpful to you. And it's like, okay, so this is the use case that I can use Infobip for. How do I do it? Do I just open up the documentation, I understand, and then within a few lines of code and a few clicks, I can send my first 2FA SMS or something like this. So we are it's all about creating this. We call it B2D, business to developers sector or department or persona, if you will, and we just want to actually work with them, and we want them to use our products and actually make their life easier whenever they need any kind of communication solution, which is what we offer. Whether is it SMS or email or WhatsApp or any of the 30 plus channels that we offer, right?
Do you think it's a surprise that the first Croatia's first unicorn is actually, building tools which are pretty much, meant for developers? I guess, being engineers ourselves, we somehow probably understand, other engineers better. I don't know. That was because in Bulgaria it's actually the same thing. It was Telerik, that was later on acquired by Progress. So it was again a company that was really close to the needs of engineers.
Yeah, I mean so I think Infobip products are very vertical. So it really depends on the type of customer. What we can plug in with customers very early on, very like kind of infrastructure level, all the way to this SaaS solutions that we have on top. And now we have the self-service products where anyone can actually just create an account and log in, which wasn't the case maybe 4 or 5 years ago, where anyone can create an account and just like send some messages for authentication. Or if you're like a fintech startup, obviously you need some kind of transactional messages that you want to send via SMS or WhatsApp or email. And then having all this unified in one platform makes complete sense. But actually, the developers are the ones implementing it very often. So actually being at a source and working with developers from very early on, it's what we want to make easier. And then we think with that way, the adoption and the awareness is going to be much higher of Infobip.
What about the Startup Tribe program?
Yeah.
Tell me about this one.
My baby from
And
when
why is it actually important for Infobip to have a program like this? Why is it important for Infobip to be close to the startup community?
yeah, it's every company. I think when they reach a certain stage, they wanna start working some sooner, some later with like new ideas and new solutions. And startups are gonna be the next big thing. Why is that important? It's good for several reasons. For us, concretely in Infobip, it's good for obviously customers. Some of those startups will be early on, implement our solutions, and then become our customers. And some of them will grow. And we actually had cases like this before. Rappi was a big client of ours. It's a huge Colombian multi-billion-dollar company. They started working with us when they had like 5 employees. Bolt started working with us very early on. So, and then now uses us for everything. So each and every interaction you have with Bolt is basically through Infobip. And they realized, but we wanted to formalize this through a program. We wanted the startups early on to come, and we are giving them products to use, to play. And then not just that, some of them we became partners with. So we build products together as well, or we sell our products through them, or they can offer our products to their customers, for example. And obviously down the road, it's also good. We are still, let's say, at the early stage of the startup program, and then down the road, it's also good for acquisitions, M&As at an earlier stage, and also investments at one point. So I think we already reached that size where this is kind of relevant. And then you can see it in the industry, Google for startups, AWS for startups, Zendesk for startups, Stripe has the Atlas program, etc. So there's every, let's say, medium, bigger tech company has their.
There are many who don't have a program like this.
Yeah, at some point they will. Some do it later. I think for us, it's very important to get it early on, and then we have it because that's way for us to get like really, really. And then also for sometimes we have startups that build entire products on our platform, and because we've been traditionally more enterprise, very B2B. We try to be very generous with startups, very open-minded, and we try to provide value to them as well. Connect them to investors. They all come to the Shift conference where they, can pitch or get a booth. We create kind of content for them. We try to promote some of the startups that use our products as well to showcase other startups how they can use it. But this way, we also provide some visibility for the startup as well. So we think this is a great opportunity down the. In its essence, Infobip is very much so an enterprise company still, but we see this as a huge long-term bet.
You mentioned that this year you had around 1,000 applications for the program.
Yeah, it's since the beginning, since the funding. So in 3 years we had. It's a bit less than 3 years now since we started, but we had about over 1,000 applications for the program. That means 1,000 startups of all different walks of lives, industries, and countries and geographies, which I'm very, very happy, very proud. We are a very international company. We have about 75 offices around the world, and the startups come from 116 countries, if I'm not mistaken now. Wow. Which is really, really global. So we have startups from Peru and South Sudan and Indonesia and Sweden, obviously US, UK, it's just like 116 countries is really, really a lot, and we are super happy because we can reach the startups that maybe some other companies would overlook because it's not their primary market.
Do you believe that in some way Infobip's story is inspiring them as well? Because it is, after all, it was a startup, and it was also a bootstrap startup. So the success that you have made, being also in a region that is not typically associated with unicorns yet.
Yeah, that's a good point. And also started in Bodjan, which is like a small town on the coast.
On top of everything, yeah.
That now has approximately same amount of inhabitants as Infobip has employees. And I always show when we go around the world in conference, especially talking to students, we always show the garage where our founders started the company, which looks a little bit like the Apple garage and the Google garage in Silicon Valley in Palo Alto, but then with a big distinction, it's not in Silicon Valley. You're not surrounded. You're not surrounded with 100 VCs within walking distance or a 5-minute drive distance and so on. So it's really, but if nothing, I think what this tells startups, to your point, that it's obviously it's different if you're in Silicon Valley or if you're in Peru or if you're in Indonesia maybe. But if this tells tells the startups that you can really make it from anywhere, right?
Mm.
Like so, and then one upside that we always say as well, it's like being from a small market, like Croatia being obviously not like a huge market. It's very good for startups because you can plan immediately to go global. You need
Yes.
to your point about Japan before, many successful tech solutions and startups in Japan are not international, because if you're number one in Japan, you're probably like a billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar company, because it's a huge market. And then language barrier, they don't want to go out. Being from Croatia or from Estonia is a good example, of course, with building a lot of
Romania, Bulgaria.
a lot of exactly a lot of unicorns from like very relatively small, unobvious markets, because you immediately have to plan going global. And this is what we did, and this is when we started very soon opening offices all around the world. And we have offices. What I say, obviously, our business is also heavily telco related, but we open offices in, I would call them not traditional places to open offices. Of course, we have offices in the U.S., in Europe, all over Europe, but we also have offices, in a lot of West Africa, East Africa, South America, almost every country, Southeast Asia. That usually, I would say, big tech companies, they only open an office in Singapore, but we have offices in Vietnam and in Thailand, in the Philippines, and Singapore. And pretty much any country there. It's a huge market. There are huge countries, so it's very, very beneficial for us to be global in a way.
I have always imagined that it could be very challenging, to, I don't know, sustain a certain culture, especially when you grow that fast and when you grow that multinational. I mean, culture is also nothing stable, so it's not solid. It changes with almost every new employee and a new team and a new office. You kind of like add value to the conversation, to the company, to the organization. So I've wondered at the moment when you joined Infobip, because I think that having your background, you probably had a lot of choices. Why Infobip, and was it something about the culture that fascinated you, or that gave you the confidence you're going to be happy here?
Yeah, again, questions that are very relevant in terms of planning. I think the timing was really right when it happened, and it happened that Ivan sold Shift to Infobip, and I know him and we worked together, and we continue working really, really well within Infobip. It was, not to lie, it was very important for me that it was a company from back home, as you said, the first unicorn. I lived all over the world in the last 20 years and everything, but I was in a way proud and happy that actually a company from Croatia managed to achieve this. And even this campus, I visited, Googleplex for the first time, about 10 years ago in Silicon Valley, and I was like, this is the closest we have that. And there's other campuses being built now as well in Croatia, which is great. There's other unicorns. But for me it was like, and then the story is pretty inspiring, as I said. One of the reasons why people always say bootstrap unicorn, and one of the reasons that why is bootstrap, because our founders didn't really know about, the possibility to fundraise or raise when they started 15 years ago. They started in their garage. I think Silvia, our CEO, had like a small loan from his parents that he kind of paid back eventually.
Okay.
But that was it. So and it is a great story. And then a company being really, really so global, it really makes a difference. And it's beautiful to be here in Zagreb or in Vodnjan, in our other campus, and you see people from all around the world that work here and travel in for obviously meetings, workshops, plannings, and so on. So that is really good. It worked out really well so far. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you think that people who work for Infobip have a common trait in some way?
Yeah, culture is very important in any company, and for me, you can almost sense it if you spend some time in a company. Whether is it Google or AWS, they're huge companies with tens of thousands of employees, some of them hundreds of thousands, and you can always feel it. And even walking around our campus, you can sense a little bit of this. My favorite slogan is like, we are just starting, because to your previous question, we really, really are aware that we need to maintain our startup mentality, the innovation mentality, the kind of hacking mentality that we had from the very beginning. So we want to maintain this. It's harder when you become big and when you have 3,000 plus people, is becoming really, really challenging because you have to have other processes, of course, and then our clients, our markets, our products are heavily regulated, so you have to be like on top of regulation in any country, whether it's India or the Emirates or the US, you know, and so we need to cover all of that. So it's really, really hard, but we always try to reimagine ourselves because, you know, if you don't do it, you'll die eventually. It's just like this path where if you get really, really comfy, we're a global leader in what we do. If you get kind of relaxed, it's not a good long-term plan for a company, I think.
Well, there are many companies who become complacent as soon as they start feeling way too comfortable in their space.
Yeah, we're trying to avoid that.
Yeah. I guess also, you know, the proximity to the startup community is also something that could, I don't know, give you a source of inspiration. And in this sense, I wondered, which sectors are you currently most bullish about? Yeah.
I mean, on the Infobip side, it's like very straightforward in a way that we are very sector or industry agnostic. So pretty much anyone can use us.
Yeah.
Anyone who has customers or anyone who has customers of customers can use us. So obviously, fintech is an obvious client for us. Mobility, you know, the Ubers and the Bolts, they're all our clients. So anyone who has a lot of customers, B2C delivery solutions, you know, anything. Now we see a huge increase in healthcare and health tech, and like telemedicine. Obviously,
Okay.
We have some great startups in this part of Europe, but also in Africa that we work with, that are actually using our solutions to deliver medicine in like remote parts of Kenya or other African countries.
Oh, wow.
Where you can actually talk to the doctor via WhatsApp, and then you can actually get your SMS to pick up your order medicine, etc. So it's actually it's pretty impressive how these things work. So there's literally we have no limitation on industry. Some industries are obviously more open to our solutions. The more customers, the more engagement you have. Like some companies like Meta, of course, or as I said, the Bolts and the delivery apps and so on. They are very, very in necessity of this because you have to. Depending on the use case, you have to authenticate the users, you have transactions, you have marketing. So all this communication you can do. And the upsides of this omnichannel approach that we're doing is like, it's that you can actually deliver the right message on the right channel. It's different when you get a message on SMS or email. You know, email, if I'm in a busy environment, I'm never gonna read it. But if I get an SMS, that's the reason why you get your bank OTPs on an SMS. But in terms of, I wouldn't talk too much about industry as much as technology, and obviously that's the elephant in the room is AI, and we obviously.
I was just about to ask you. I guess you're expecting major disruption when it comes to communication. We as well in the media, and you know, I'm talking to you as a former colleague. I mean, you have been part of a media company much more established than the Recursive, but anyway, so you have experienced the disruption firsthand.
Yeah. So for us, it really opens. We're still at an early stage, I would say, of AI, but it's opens a lot of possibilities that we have. And now, some things, the wow effect, the same as you had with like first time you use ChatGPT, we can actually aggregate all these like LLMs like through our platforms, and we basically give an outlet through channels. So you can build now super advanced chatbots, for example, on WhatsApp or any of the messaging platforms. Before it was more like you enter the information and you can basically browse through the information. Now you can actually engage with it, them learning from. So there's definitely disruption for our industry, but in disruption for any of our clients as well. So everyone should be on top of it. So we have, even in media, you can definitely have like some kind of platform where you can actually interact with the news as opposed to just read the news. I'm sure that's going to come. And then we always focus on the channeling part. So whether which channel you deliver this through. But I think it's kind of exciting. It's of course a little bit scary, like with every new technology. We'll see how this works. But I'm always a bit careful. So I'll give it some more time. Everyone's on top of this. All our clients want to know more. All our clients are asking us how we implement AI. We call it conversational AI as well. It's super. It's getting super advanced. We have huge teams of engineers and product people working on it as well. So I think we pushed out some really, really exciting solutions. but the disruption is huge. We see this. I jokingly say I go to a lot of pitch competitions of startups, and now in the last year or so, maybe year and a half, every startup has an AI slide. They no matter what industry, no matter what they do, whether they do media or they do fintech or they do health tech, the one slide at least is like AI, and then it's usually a black box with data in and happiness out. And
Yeah.
no one really knows why. Some of them, in my opinion, don't need to have AI, but everyone is. It's definitely also a trend, right?
I think AI is the new digital. You remember how we used to use the term digital before?
Yeah.
Now it's actually, something that is obvious. We don't use it anymore, but we would put digital in front of everything.
Yeah, and there was big data was also at one point very relevant.
But
And then,
less, I think.
then you had several rebrandings of obviously of Web3 and blockchain technologies, of course.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit, of course, it's a hype, and then you have to go with the hype, I think. But the technology is real, is behind it. I would probably put myself more in a skeptic camp in terms of I'm more careful to see where this is going. But it is super transformative as well. In terms of we started implementing it in-house as well, how we do stuff. Some things are really, really getting better with it.
For me, it was surprising that although we had the necessary data and the necessary channels and tools to be a bit more, or to build much more personalized communications, especially marketing, actually we didn't do it. We were still pretty much bombarded by any types of, value propositions that were out there, although they would not be relevant, or at least this is how I felt in the, I still feel, especially on social media and so on and so forth. So I'm wondering, are we going to take the chance this time, with AI, where this kind of personalization is probably much easier and it's also much cheaper, to target our value propositions much sharper exactly to those people that are going to use them. After all, AI allows you, and conversational AI especially, allows you to learn from the behavior of the user. Yeah.
Yeah, it should get much better. Like, I think, in a way, it's a double-edged sword. Of course, there's always people that are. We've seen the overall. What was it last year? OpenAI saga. With the firings or semi-firings or non-firings.
I never really got the gist of that.
What happened, but that was definitely between how you deploy it and how all the safeguards that you can put on top of it. In terms of personalization, I agree with you. It will become better. I think it should be much better. The question is at what cost? The question is at if you want to be more conservative, how much will you safeguard privacy, what people want. And security in a way if you want, but I think it definitely will get better. Yeah, we should definitely achieve that. I got a lot of ads that are definitely not targeted at me. I got a lot of reach outs that are not targeted at me, but
I think this is also why the privacy concerns grew higher and higher, because all those campaigns, they weren't targeted at the right time, at the right person. And at some point we were just overloaded. Even now, if I just open my personal YouTube that I've had for years and years and years, I get 5 ads before I watch the video, especially now in the summer, which I wouldn't say are necessary for me.
They're
it's just
not relevant.
Spam. It's just spam.
Yeah.
It's just,
And then someone charges for it, so it's for showing you the video, but it's definitely something that needs improvement. I think
that's the problem, exactly, because the business model is built on that. The more someone spends on advertising, the better they would be treated and the more visibility they would actually get. So, yeah.
I'm a big believer in UX, and UX is king and queen and everything at the same time, and people don't really care as long as it works. So if you get the right ad that you really need, or something you're looking for, you're going to be kind of thankful. I think people would then disregard all the other concerns that they might have, all the annoyance for not watching the video. Or same goes with any other app. If I call a car and if I use Uber or Bolt and I call a car and the car doesn't arrive or the app breaks down, like I'm not going to use it anymore. People have very short attention span nowadays, and UX is crucial for me. For it has to deliver on the goods, and same goes for advertisers. Same goes for media. Same goes for communication solutions. We need to deliver. If it doesn't work, if the messages don't go through on the Infobip platform, it can be for whatever reason, but we're not delivering, and then users are not happy. And if we deliver the right message, or if you receive a message, if you request for, like, let's say a password for logging into your bank, and then you receive it like half an hour later, this is not good UX. And then you're gonna be have all the other issues that come together with it. But if it works, I think people would disregard all this. So that definitely has to be applied on advertisers, and I think we should deliver on that. And I think AI with the models and the trainings, and we're playing, for example, it's different. It's not an advertisement example, but it's engagement with people on a conference. That conferences and meetups that we organize, we try to have better experience with, like, talking to them and chatbots and so on. So, and this is going to, for example, become much better because you can interact with it's still, the popular hallucinations. There's still a lot that has to be fixed, and this is why they are trained. It's also very expensive, nowadays to build it, but you can actually build something that's fun and useful to interact with, not just to showcase, not just. I think we all, when there's new technology with ChatGPT or any other solution that you used, you really enjoy that first thing where you can actually talk to it, and then you need the delivery mode when you need, like, okay, now I needed to write something for me, but it has to be good. It has to be correct. So if you have to, like, nowadays we're still at the stage that it's amazing on one hand, but if you want to write an article, you still have to double check it. You have to do the fact checking, You have to do so you're like, yeah, this is amazing that it wrote me like 1,000, words article, but I still, is this number correct? I need to double check that, right?
That's the one thing, and I also have to say that because people ask us, of course, this question, being a media company, providing a lot of journalistic, work, people ask us often if AI is going to, take our job. And the way that I see it right now, of course, for the users, it's the output that is visible of the journalistic work, so they would see the article or the video or whatever. And I think AI definitely empowers us to do more and produce more. But the output is just as good as the editor. So even in the traditional newsroom, you would have all sorts of editors, but there is always someone who is, making like a quality check, a fact check. Okay, is this in our editorial line? Is this in our style? And so on and so forth. And it is this person who is giving, like, the voice and the depth and the quality of whatever you're publishing. So if I just put something in ChatGPT, it will make it easier for me to create a text, but the final edits are still on me. Yeah. And they're going to be as good as I am. That's how I see it from today's point perspective. And it's not only about the checks. It's sometimes it's just, even the wording. I think it's, I can definitely recognize now pieces that have been written on ChatGPT. So sometimes they have these pompous words, which are like completely out of
It was with the
place.
academic community,
Yeah.
well. I can notice when in the DevEx department there's four departments, and then when my team leads have to write usually some let's say less interesting reporting or something like this, and then I recognize when they use ChatGPT pretty much within the 5 words, within the first 5 words. It is getting better, that's for sure, but I completely agree with you. And having the experience in media as well, I had the occasional opportunity to write for, not being a journalist, but basically pulling my colleagues for the sleeve because I wanted to write about a topic, and then obviously would have to go in a media organization, serious media organization, like Nikkei was very Japanese as well in a way. Then I was always amazed by the corrections that would come back. They would be like, all the facts would be like question marks, like, because I would write something along the line, the largest startup ecosystem and like Silicon Valley, and then it would ask me on the side, no, it's like according to who, and then I would be like, oh goddamn, I have to check that. Or even better, it was like writing titles. I would like put a lot of effort to write like some super catchy title, like the muddy waters of, I don't know, regulation in tech or something like this, and then they're just like scrapped. Because obviously there is a person there that has been doing this all their life and they're really good at it. And I was amazed how this is spot on. Like, why didn't I think of this title? Yeah.
Also because they follow a certain voice. So every media company or every kind of like journalistic outlet has their own style and their own voice. That and usually it's a bit objective, a bit more objective than, let's say, the way PR is, right? By the way, funny story, I would never forget it. So at some point I get a message from a founder on my messenger, I think it was, where he's letting me know that we published an article about them, but they didn't consider it good. So yesterday they put a lot of effort with the other co-founder, and they wrote the article again, and he's now sending me the new piece. And I looked at the piece and I was thinking, but do you have factual corrections or no? They just completely corrected the style of it, and they would put pompous words like cutting edge and
of course,
one-stop shop and all these and the best whatever in its category. I don't remember it anymore, but it was hard for me to convey that this is not how we write. And from a PR perspective, actually it is a very bad strategy to correct the style of a journalist. Even if you don't like it, just leave it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think no, we at Infobip, I think also we're known to be very low in a way where I mean, on one hand, being an enterprise and B2B, we it's not the same as being a B2C company, right?
No.
So it's being out there and being having a brand presence as well. But I think, it's, now that you're talking, it's actually a very interesting parallel with the tone of voice or something of a media and a culture in a company. And I thought about this when you said it. You have to maintain this and you have to keep this, and you can feel it immediately. Like when you read a article, in the Recursive or in the Guardian or in whatever, and it's always like in a way, and that's nice. That's what makes it specific. At what point would AI be really become so good that you can say like, write this article, basically when you won't be able to notice the difference? Because now we can still notice the difference, and we'll see when will be so good where you can like, okay, this is one of my journalists wrote this, but maybe AI wrote it. This is the inflection
I guess
point.
that's the world of proprietary large language models. I guess inevitably at some point we will start training our own models, and that goes also for media. That goes also for the recursive. We ourselves are also experimenting with that. Can we train our own models so that it does specific functions, maybe for the newsroom, but maybe also for those who are consuming the content, where you give them like an extra layer to play with the content in a different way, not necessarily reading it or watching it or whatever. Yeah. I don't know. It would be nice to observe also how people use, the information that we have gathered over the years. I think at this point we probably have more than 1,000 articles, and I don't know how many videos that we have put out there in the past 3 years. So yeah,
I think it's like it's really crucial to achieve kind of some level of, I think, well, I don't know if it's the amount or recognizability where it's crucial for whether AI or even the general audience to recognize that. And then, but the more we talk, the more I think about AI, like it's a bit of a trend now, and I don't want to be skeptic now, but every bubble slightly deflates at some point. So there's going to be a lot of obstacles along the way, and we can see some regulatory, legal obstacles.
Oh yeah.
The Scarlett Johansson kind of situation with her voice being used by OpenAI and you know, and stuff like this. So it's gonna be.
I think the Times
Oh.
was actually the one that was also very interesting for me from an IP point, from
Mhm.
an IP perspective.
Yeah, it's gonna have a lot of roadblocks. It's a little bit like with some other technologies that we put a lot of hope in, and then we realized, okay, maybe there's like a lot of. It's not as easy, and it's gonna take more time than necessary.
And I hope so. I was just thinking about it recently. So, as a user, you know, we kind of like believe that journalism is the product that we are consuming, like the piece of content that is going to be in TV or in the newspaper or on a digital platform. But actually, journalism has different steps and different functions. And one of it is exactly doing this primary research where you go out in the field and you talk to someone and you gather information and you filter out what is relevant, what is not relevant. You take different perspectives and you kind of like combine them together. And what bugs me out of it is this is not considered intellectual property. Yeah, it is the final piece. And the final piece is just, you know, out there, and the large language models are going to read it and, you know, consume it and even maybe hallucinate on it. And they're not going to give you even, you know, the credit for it. I would like us to think about a different model, because this is a lot of work. I mean, when you think about a journalist and how much work they spend if they work properly in the research, this is at least half of what, if not 2/3 of their time that they're going to spend on publishing and, you know, writing the piece and then putting it out there, let's say on LinkedIn and social media. I was just thinking about, you know, all the big terminals like Bloomberg, Thomson Reuters, and they also consume a lot of data to give like this financial perspective, but at least they pay you for every clipping. Yeah. So I think the big large language models, they would have to the large language models, they will have to maybe adopt a similar business model.
Yeah, it's interesting. I would still, to your point, I would still consider it as a tool in terms of it might, for me, for example, it helps. We go to a lot of conferences, for example, as we try to engage with startups a lot, and this is part of what the startups do. And then some conferences are bigger, and we tend to take more people. And then I used to build this schedule for people, you know, to be where to be, etc. And stuff like this, it's not super advanced math, but like ChatGPT is great for that. Like I use that, like, oh, you know, create me a schedule with like 9 people in 6 different positions throughout these days, and for everyone not to be longer than 1 hour and so on. So it's obviously does so much more than that, but for me it's very useful there, and then still have to double check it, but so that, you know, the same name doesn't repeat, or maybe I made a mistake with a prompt or something. But like it's still a tool, and it's going to remain this tool, and it's just how you adapt and use this tool. The part of doing an original journalistic piece and the hard work that is behind it, that you said, that still cannot be done by ChatGPT, you know. It's
it
like,
cannot.
Yeah.
But I don't know, maybe at the next Shift conference, or maybe even just internally at Infobip, especially tech-savvy people, like, you know, people who are working at Infobip, ask them for how many of them ChatGPT is now becoming a source of information.
It's, you know what?
I mean,
it's a bit like Wikipedia before, you know?
Or even social media. I mean, for many people, over time, social media became, you know, the source of news.
Yeah.
They wouldn't open news anymore.
And I wrote like high school or university thesis on Wikipedia, and, you know, and all that. And the question is like, you know, at some end it's crowdsourced, someone wrote that. So there's definitely, it's not super advanced scientific work, but it is becoming like this. And to be honest, I saw, you know, Paul Graham, the Y Combinator founder, he said one point he's moving ChatGPT to the top first few tabs in his browser, which is exactly what I did like a few days before that, and in a way I was kind of proud. So it's becoming like a tool that's like number one for me is my email, my first tab, and the second tab is something that I use a lot, for example, and third tab. And then, like many people in tech, I have 50 tabs open at least. And then, I switch between Command and 9, which is my last tab, and Command and 1 and 2, which is my top 2. And then I moved ChatGPT to the left. That was the inflection point when it means it became relevant for me. Of course, with all the other tools that I use. But so it's definitely, the number is growing of people using it internally. Our engineers, I know they get a lot of help sometimes with like the code, but it's kind of the same paradigm. It's same, like you can't rely on it. And so I'm not afraid of it. That maybe puts me in the skeptic camp as well. Not afraid of them replacing us or replacing humans that soon, to some degree. Some very, very repetitive work, maybe some. It's definitely helps me a lot with some tasks, but I wouldn't. I hope it's not doing my job.
It's an interesting topic, because I don't think I am afraid, but I'm not afraid of replacing us. I'm afraid of the influence that is going to have on how people maybe build their mindsets, educate themselves, learn about new things, inform themselves, entertain themselves, and so on and so forth. You mentioned Wikipedia. I remember at the university there were times when our professors would say, don't use Wikipedia as your source.
But
it's not scientific.
But then you click on the source on Wikipedia.
But you would still click, and then you would, kind of like hide it, whatever.
Or you click on the source of Wikipedia and you just quote that as a source.
Now, I'm thinking of all the people who make their political decisions based on what they consume on social media, and they do that knowing, I hope, that they're in a bubble, in a confirmation bias all the time. And you can see what this is doing to our political systems right now. And now I'm thinking, okay, if we can fast forward and put ChatGPT in our top 3 tabs, how is this going to influence our societal structure and our behavior in the society, in the political? This is what I'm afraid of, and I'm not sure that we can foresee it. But yeah, that's what I'm afraid of, and I believe that we need to start thinking about it today, because we've done these mistakes a couple of times.
I mean, the most human.
Especially when you kind of like leave it to the hands of the big tech, which are now stronger than any political power in the world.
Yeah, it's always a bit questionable. I think how are you gonna? I think there's this one human skill that has been so far so good for us is adaptability, right? And so we really. For me, it's unimaginable nowadays how kids go to school. Like, I didn't have a smartphone at school. I didn't have access to, Wikipedia. God forbid ChatGPT, and now kids have it. So we definitely have to. And my fear, similar to yours, is like, how long is it going to take schools or the political system or the regulators to adapt to stuff like this? Because it's already here. Like,
and I'm not even sure that they understand it yet.
Yeah, no, of course. But it's normal. I always defend regulators in a way, because they have to follow. They have to follow very close. And often people expect regulators to be innovators, which is counterintuitive. It can't work. Regulators can't be innovators. They have to enable innovation, and they have to follow it very close and very. And it's a very, very hard task to have. But also, education, political system, there's implications for that are unimaginable. How, for me, writing a school paper would be so easy now, I think. But then, of course, hopefully teachers adapted now. You have software to recognize if it was written by AI, and you had software for plagiarism before to see if copied somewhere. And it's a really, really impressive paradigm that kids nowadays have, which they had before. It's not an AI thing, but all the knowledge in the world, in the palm of their hand, good and bad, all the information is relevant. And then it's how actually having tools and enabling them with this. And this is the hard part. And this is also applicable to companies. And this is applicable to bigger companies like us. It's applicable to startups as well. You kind of, you now need more, you have just things are faster, you have less time, so you have to build with more foresight. So if you're building whatever, I don't know, let's like a digital, I think if you start building like a digital bank now, like any other, you know, we all have it now. Every region, every country has their own, but I would build it now with a foresight, like what technology will be able to do, and it's hard, in 5 years from now, and or 3. Yeah, good point. 5 is maybe a bit too
Yeah.
ambitious, but like 3 years from now, because this is for when you need to build for. This is what what your users will be doing. It's probably easier than just adapt there. So you need, the macro levels are becoming kind of faster. The macro views are becoming faster. So I think I'm trying to understand, and I mean the same goes for us. We need to, like a good paradigm in our industry is like SMS. It's a super old protocol. It's still the most used messaging system in the world, and everyone uses it. It's insane, but it's 30 years
It is
old.
insane. Yeah.
But it's, and then of course you have better protocols, but for many reasons, now Apple finally adopted or accepted RCS, which by many indicators is a good protocol or a better protocol for many ways, for communication, safer and more agile. Let's call it that way, but it's not widespread because of the divide with the phone makers, right? But then you had a lot of messaging systems like WhatsApp and Viber and stuff like this, but they are not global. They're very regional. In Japan they use Line, in Thailand they use Line, in Korea they use Kakao Talk, and so on.
Exactly. I was just about that. I also read their specifics to every region. How do they communicate? Which platforms do they use, and so on and so
So you
forth.
have to be
Even
on top.
within probably Eastern Europe, we have very different behavior. But I was, before we end, I wanted to maybe throw a bit of a perspective on the Croatian ecosystem and understand also a bit better the Infobip effect, similar to the the PayPal effect, maybe. To what extent do you still consider Infobip a Croatian company now that it grew so much, and we would see, I think, many more unicorns now coming from the region? But how do you view actually the effect of the story that this is possible from a small country somewhere at the Adriatic seaside? Not even a main town by 2 guys who were just in a garage without even venture capital money.
I very, very good question, and very unsatisfactory answer maybe. Like I consider it 100% Croatian and 100% global. And that doesn't answer the question in a logical sense.
But it's love.
And it's I mean, of course we have all these offices around the world, and we have, it's in a way it's interesting to be part of such a big organization, because you come to Brazil and then we have 100 people in the office in Curitiba, or you go to Bogota and we have 100 people in the office there, and it's like it's a lot of people when you come to an office. It's very far away, and then you meet them and it's like, hi people, I'm here, good to meet you all. But so we're definitely global in that way, and because even if you work around here in campus, you have people from probably like 50 countries in the world or something like this. But I would say in essence in Croatian, our biggest office is here, our second biggest office is in Vodnjan. So the founders live here. I think it's very much so Croatian as well. It's very hard to define that. And the impact to your point on the impact of the ecosystem, I think, I really, really am a big believer in success stories and success breeding success. And you had this first big company, and unicorn is a very arbitrary measure. It's indicative and it's useful, but it's arbitrary. And we want to position. I think it should be our goal and responsibility to position ourselves. Maybe the PayPal, but maybe the comparison I like even better. It's Skype, and the same they call it the PayPal mafia or the Skype mafia in Estonia. But you have what you see is basically what people see is the possibility of creating companies like this from anywhere. and then Estonians saw that, and Estonians built, 10 or 11 unicorns so far. Again, not unicorns being the only measure of success, but in Croatia now we have two Rimac, obviously, and Infobip, and then in Bulgaria, Romania with UiPath as well, of course. It's Turkey has quite a few now because of the market, and it's pretty impressive that you can see like, oh wow, we can build this Lithuanian the secondhand fashion shop, and as well they are like, it's pretty impressive. The companies like this can actually build talent, and what I'm super excited about, we have good engineering talent. That's what we're blessed with, and going to schools. The paradigm, like maybe 10-15 years ago, if you had everyone just went to engineering school, they would like, oh, they're going to work in one of the big companies and state companies, and now they have incubators, and I'm often there. They're doing a really good job, and literally all the kids have startups. And then funny story happened to me once at FER, the engineering faculty here, electrical engineering faculty here in Zagreb. That I went, and then there was this is super early stage kids at uni, and they're pitching like a startup and a solution, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then there's like 5 other startups, and then there's like 6 or 7 startups, and then they're pitching, and I was like, these guys look familiar. I was like, you guys pitched before, right? Like they're the first startup. They have 2 startups, right? and this is pretty impressive, because the effect on, you see, there's 2 parts of the work or the job to be done. One is by companies like Infobip that actually build success, actually to, I think, reiterate it and copy and create more success. Whether is it with investments, whether is it with like, replication ideas. Creating more of the ecosystem layer for that, and then the rest is on the people itself, the kids, maybe seeing, okay, that's possible. In Croatia we had, except the 2 unicorns, we had like a huge exit, roughly estimated about, I think, $500 million. Last year we had a couple of bigger exits, 100 million plus, which is pretty impressive compared to like what is 10 years ago. But you have to keep like with the company. I think with the ecosystem is the same, because you have to keep fighting. You have to you have to make it better and better, because otherwise you're gonna get overstepped or overturned by someone else, some new competitor, some new disruptor, and I think we're doing fine so far.
I think the challenge here is actually to make this kind of success a systematic success, because Infobip at its beginning was an outlier, and it's actually still an outlier. Now, what kind of lessons can we take from this experience and apply it so that we can build a whole machine that is going to produce maybe not necessarily unicorns, but just great companies which are coming from this world, with more and more people who believe in themselves that this is possible. And I totally subscribe to the motive, that success breeds success. This is, I just, was thinking that we obviously have a similar mission, because do you know that the Recursive is called the Recursive because of that?
Okay, no, I didn't know that, yeah.
Well, at some point, we just thought that it's like a recursion. I mean, you just do it again and again, and then at some point, you become better.
Yeah, that's a good point, yeah.
And one story is going to inspire, or one success story is going to inspire the next success story. So it is basically the model. We're just the storytellers of it. You're building the companies. We're just, there to share that with the world.
You need that. I mean, every ecosystem, as I said before, has its peculiarities, and you have to leverage the strengths of every ecosystem. Whether it's an engineering talent, whether it's the good media, whether it's the enormous amount of capital that Japan maybe has. I worked on some projects on Cuba, which is not the obvious example for startup success, but they have great engineers.
Yes.
And they're in the same time zone as America. But then a lot of external factors come in. You had elections in America that overturned the relationship with Cuba, for example. But there was one point that opening was like this huge kind of force was kind of opening towards, for example, and then they were trying to leverage on that. They completely like the infrastructure. There is no internet, there is no mobile internet, etc. But where there is a will, there is a way. So I think our countries are still lacking for sure. What's crucial, I think, and what makes Silicon Valley is the capital, and we're definitely lacking that still. To the degree that you need more capital and more, like, obviously venture capital I'm talking about here, and more infrastructure stuff. And then with companies, quality comes on top. Of course, I think competition is great. If you have 10 accelerators, one of them is going to be probably great, or two, and then 5 are going to be.
Silicon Valley is very interesting, and it is definitely a must place to visit, in my opinion. I was there very short. It is the venture capital, or the availability, the access to capital. It is the mindset of people around you. It is the proximity to the academia and to the research. I think many people during the pandemics moved out of the Silicon Valley because it was too expensive, it wasn't pleasant to live there anymore, and for many reasons. But now they started coming back. Why? Because the research is still happening there. And still, I don't believe that the Silicon Valley model is applicable anywhere in the world. I definitely believe that there are so many different ecosystems around the world that have developed their own model, and they've managed to leverage their own strengths, just as you mentioned.
Absolutely.
I mean, we have the engineering excellence. We have maybe also a quality of life that in other places people don't have. We have social structures that are a bit different. We have I don't know, still this kind of like family mindset here that I don't know, it gives you like a sort of a safety net. And we are hungry. I mean, we've been in a crisis, economic crisis, for so many years. Do you know that Central and Eastern Europe, unlike the US and unlike Western Europe, is still there? The formations of startups are still growing, and anywhere in the world they're actually decreasing. It's just crazy.
You definitely have to leverage this. We definitely have an advantage, I think, on hunger is a great part here. I was doing a study about 3 years ago. I definitely want to update this now, and it was about the numbers of unicorns per capita and per GDP around the world. So I did this about 3 years ago, and then there was actual unicorns that existed at that time. Like, there was like a snapshot in time, and then Norway had 0, and then the people were like, interesting, how does Norway have no? And I was like, well, I mean, don't want to smear Norway or something, but my half joking kind of comment was like, I mean, it's a very rich country, they're not hungry. So that definitely has parts to do with it. I agree with you that Silicon Valley is very unique. You can't replicate it. Silicon Valley definitely is Silicon Valley, and I don't think no other ecosystem in the world is close to it in that kind of way, neither in London or Singapore,
and
or
it
you name
doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be. Absolutely. You need elements you need to leverage here. I mean, all these big companies in Croatia, later investments and so on, are actually built without venture capital. Like, even all the companies that are big now, because at the time there was none. Now you have, with creating some name and creating awareness and creating the education, this is what we try to provide to startups as well through our program, is like startups know how to pitch to startups, they know how to reach out, they know how to get investors.
Look, capital is actually following the smart people who are building the companies. And I think now that we have also this success stories more and more, we will attract much more awareness and attention from those who have the capital. And what I can say here is that our audience as the Recursive is growing outside of the region, because people are interested more and more in Central and Eastern Europe, and they don't want to have these companies like Infobip or Payhawk or UiPath in their anti-portfolio. I mean, they felt like they had missed something. So they want to be here for the next success stories which are going to come.
I would see, like, absolutely agree. If I was an investor and someone looking at globally, and someone trying to make money, which is in the end what investors do, which is their essence, is like, if I would hear, okay, look at this part of the world. We have, exactly as you said, you have Infobip, you have Payhawk, you have UiPath, you have Remats, like whatever is like, what's happening there? I'm not going to make any names, but some of my friends, investors in Central Europe more and West Europe, I've been for years telling them like you should open like send someone to be here on the ground, like send, because you're gonna miss out on opportunities and talent early stage, because it's different. Of course you want to follow, but exactly as you said, you want to follow, you want to come there. As I said, there's gonna be others and you're gonna be too late. If I were you, I would open an office in Zagreb. It doesn't have to be Zagreb, it can be Sofia, it can be Bucharest, but and then you can cover this kind of region, and then you can be
It's exactly how
when
we
you're
do it.
with all the opportunities that we have nowadays, with all the communication and Zooms and phones, it's still not the same as being on the ground. If I'm sure if you spend now 3 months in Zagreb, you would know everyone, you know how it works, and it's different from, of course you can talk to all those people online, and it's very, very different. And so having feet on the ground still makes a difference, I think. Same goes for investors, and same goes for startups opening or companies opening new markets, etc.
True. Okay, I need to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we have a tight schedule. No, we have a tight schedule because today is Croatia playing against whom?
Albania.
Albania. So I think it's more like a national holiday here for you guys. So we won't be able really to have the podcast afterwards. But Nikola, thank you so much for hosting us, for allowing us to be here and to touch a bit, on the special sauce of building, the special unicorn sauce that you have here. We'll stay in touch, and I think, we're aligned on the same mission. Let's support each other.
Thank you for coming, and then please come to Shift in September. It's our flagship conference in Zagreb, Croatia. We'll see you there. Hopefully again, like in the past years. Yes. It's kind of a big kind of festival of tech and developers and a party, and it's still warm, and Croatia really is nice in summer.
And you have the startup competition there this year as well, right?
We have a startup stage and startup competition, and all our startups get tickets to the obviously some of them it's kind of far to travel, but they all get tickets to attend. And Zadar is a nice town. It's still mid-September, still warm. You can still swim, so I always encourage people to come. It's really, we bring a lot of famous developers, speakers, great companies, top tech companies in the world are our partners and sponsors, and then also like investors and startups. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and I would invite everyone and hopefully see you there.
Great people. Well. You have the seaside. We're going to have a party, probably great Wi-Fi.
Make a holiday out of it. Make a holiday out of it. And then
what can go wrong?
And today is the game, and then which is equivalent to religion in Croatia here a little bit. But sometimes I may make paragons between a Croatian football team and Croatian tech. It's like punching above its weight. So we're trying to do this, and you always, if you want to aspire to success, I think really you have to be competitive. You want to do the best, and then you really need to punch above your weight. And this is why we're a bit hungry as well.
Thank you, Nikola.
Thank you.
And if you are just as passionate about innovation as we are, hit subscribe for the Recursive podcast on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. We're everywhere.